evento enorme per rafforzare la campagna Justice for Palestine, per chiedere di interrompere la pubblicità europea con il governo genocida di Israele.
In programma, giusto? Quello che va fuori di là. Allora, aspetta che aggiusto un attimo.
Perché sei su un altro terreno. Ringrazio ovviamente le tantissime delegazioni che sono arrivate qua da tutta Europa, partiti amici, le organizzazioni sindacali, le organizzazioni sociali. Le organizzazioni sociali, i sindacati, gli esperti che sono qui con noi oggi a discutere. Questa non vuole essere soltanto una conferenza, non un incontro tra dirigenti politici che provengono da paesi diversi. Credo sia qualcosa di più importante. Vogliamo costruire un luogo di convergenza. Oggi si incontrano donne e uomini che parlano lingue diverse, che vivono contesti nazionali differenti, ma che condividono qualcosa di fondamentale, che non è un sentimento di invidia sociale, ma la più grande questione politica del nostro tempo, la giustizia. La giustizia sociale, la giustizia economica e la giustizia fiscale. Perché non può esserci libertà vera senza uguaglianza e non può esserci neanche una democrazia piena quando la ricchezza si concentra nelle mani di pochi e quando il potere economico finisce per prevalere su quello democratico. Oggi nel mondo esistono poco più di 3.000 miliardari, 79 in Italia, 3.000 persone su 8 miliardi di persone nel mondo, sono meno degli abitanti di un piccolo paese di provincia. Eppure la loro ricchezza complessiva vale migliaia di miliardi di dollari. Quando discutiamo di tassare grandi patrimoni, non stiamo parlando della classe media, non stiamo parlando dei lavoratori, non stiamo parlando di chi vive del proprio stipendio, stiamo parlando della concentrazione di ricchezza senza precedenti nella storia contemporanea. Siamo qui per parlare delle tasse sui grandi patrimoni, della distribuzione della ricchezza, della lotta alla disuguaglianza, ma in realtà stiamo parlando di un qualcosa di più profondo. Stiamo parlando della società che vogliamo costruire. Negli ultimi decenni ci è stato detto che la ricchezza dei più ricchi avrebbe migliorato la vita di tutti. Ci è stato detto che abbassare le tasse sui grandi patrimoni avrebbe favorito la crescita e il benessere diffuso. Ci è stato detto che il mercato avrebbe corretto da solo le proprie distorsioni. È evidente che così non è stato. Oggi le disuguaglianze crescono, il lavoro è sempre più precario, l'accesso alla casa diventa impossibile per milioni e milioni di giovani. I servizi pubblici vengono impoveriti, la sanità, la scuola e il welfare sono sempre più deboli. E mentre tutto questo accade, una quota sempre più grande della ricchezza viene accumulata nelle mani di una ristrettissima elite. Questa non è una legge della natura, è politica, sono scelte politiche ed essendo scelte politiche noi abbiamo la possibilità e il dovere di cambiarle radicalmente. Questa è una battaglia per la giustizia fiscale, ma anche una battaglia per la democrazia, dicevo. Chiediamo di tassare i grandi patrimoni che contribuiscono di più, chiediamo di tassare gli extraprofitti, di contrastare i fenomeni di elusione fiscale, di distruggere i paradisi fiscali. Non vogliamo punire il successo individuale, ma vogliamo difendere l'idea che la ricchezza possa servire a migliorare la vita di tutte e di tutti. Stiamo affermando un semplice principio, che chi ha di più deve contribuire di più. Ed è importante che questa discussione avvenga nel contesto dell'Assemblea Generale di European Left Alliance, perché nessuno dei problemi che abbiamo davanti ha dei confini nazionali. La finanza, i grandi gruppi multinazionali, i fenomeni di elusione ed evasione fiscale non conoscono frontiere. E allora la nostra risposta deve essere europea e internazionale. La presenza oggi di rappresentanti della sinistra provenienti da tutta Europa ci ricorda una verità fondamentale, che le nostre battaglie possono essere diverse nelle forme ma devono essere comuni nella sostanza. Che si tratti del diritto alla casa di Madrid, della difesa del welfare di Helsinki, della lotta contro la povertà lavorativa a Berlino, della giustizia climatica a Parigi o della difesa dei lavori dei servizi pubblici in Italia, il filo che unisce tutte queste lotte è sempre lo stesso. È la lotta contro la concentrazione del potere economico e quindi la lotta contro le disuguaglianze, la lotta per una democrazia più forte. In molti paesi c'è una nuova generazione di attivisti e dirigenti politici che sta provando a riportare al centro del dibattito delle parole che per troppo tempo sono restate impronunciabili. Redistribuzione, uguaglianza, diritti sociali. Siamo noi. Penso poi a un'esperienza importante, quella del sindaco di New York, di Zoran Mandani, che negli Stati Uniti ha saputo costruire un consenso parlando con chiarezza di giustizia economica, di diritto alla casa, di servizi pubblici universali, di tassazione dei grandi patrimoni. Parlando di esperienze e contesti diversi, sì, certo, ma ci mostra una lezione importante, anzi fondamentale, che quando la sinistra ha il coraggio di parlare di condizioni materiali delle persone, quando indica con chiarezza chi beneficia delle disuguaglianze e chi ne paga il prezzo, quando costruisce una speranza invece che una rassegnazione, allora torna a essere una forza in grado di cambiare le cose, di cambiare la società. E questa è forse la sfida più grande che abbiamo davanti, quella di non limitarci a denunciare le ingiustizie, ma quella di costruire le alternative, di non limitarci a difendere ciò che resta del welfare, ma di estenderlo e di rafforzarlo, di non limitarci a resistere, ma di vincere e di cambiare le cose. Perché la lotta alle disuguaglianze non è una questione tecnica che dobbiamo riservare agli economisti, è il cuore di una battaglia politica del nostro tempo. Riguarda la qualità della democrazia, riguarda la libertà delle persone, riguarda il futuro delle nuove generazioni e riguarda anche l'idea stessa d'Europa. Noi vogliamo un'Europa che protegga i diritti, non che tuteli i privilegi.
Rights and redistributing opportunities rather than redistributing wealth. So this is the reason why we are here today, to discuss, to learn from one another, but above all to strengthen a common idea. Another Europe is possible. And obviously, the building of a new Europe goes through the redistribution of profits and the fight against inequalities. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I do hope there's still a long way to go all together. And I'm really honored now to leave the floor to the co-chair, Katarina Martins, MEP and co-chair, European Left Alliance. Thank you.
Okay, ciao. I'm sorry, but I'll speak in English. I can't speak in Italian, but I promise I will be really brief. So, first of all, I want to thank Sinistra for the possibility of being here today. It is great. Last week, we were in Rome with our ECI Justice for Palestine. It was a huge event also. So it's so good to feel all this strength, all this commitment. We are here to change. And, well, thank you very much, all of you, for being here. And I want briefly to tell you what is European Left Alliance. We are a party of left parties. We are left. We are green, we are feminists, we are anti-racist, and we are not here to make diagnostics or to comfort ourselves. We are here to change Europe and to change the world. So when we do these kind of moments, we are together, parties, with unions, with ONGs, with grassroots movements, with everyone that believes that we can live better and doesn't want inequality and war and climate disaster to be our future. That's what we are doing here also. And that is why it's so important to be here. In the European Left Alliance, we have parties from the south of Europe, Sinistra, of course, that is our host here. Thank you so much for that. Also, La France Insoumise from France, Podemos from Spain, Bloc de Esquerda from Portugal, that's where I am from. We also have Bildu from the Basque country. And then we have also the SP from the Netherlands. We have Razem from Poland. And we have the Nordic parties. We have the Red-Green Alliance from Denmark. We have the Left Alliance from Finland. We have the Left Party from Sweden. I'm so sorry, I can never say the names in the Nordic, but I'm sure I'll promise to learn. And we also have the Socialists from Norway, because they may not be in the European Union, but they are associated members. And we work with everyone that is fighting for a better future and a better Europe. And so for us, than this. I mean, Giorgio is great, and he already said why we are here. We don't believe that inequality is a way of living. We cannot live in a world where the 1% has half of the wealth of the world. We cannot live in a world where 5 men are richer than everyone has ever been in the history of human species. We need to change this. And we are in Milan, you know, and I was just talking to a friend. Milan is the second city where it's harder to get a house. The first one is Lisbon. So, but I'm sure we can see the housing crisis everywhere in our countries. And we can see an affordability crisis everywhere in our countries. And we see that wages are not enough for people to pay their monthly expenses. And this doesn't have to be like this. And that is why we are here. And we are listening from experience from the parties of Allah, but also from organizations that we invited to be here because we want to learn, we want to articulate, and we want to change. So thank you very much for being here. And now, well, we'll start with a panel of discussion, and we'll have Matteo Pucciarelli, journalist from La Repubblica, that is going to moderate the panel. So thank you very much. Let's debate.
Buonasera a tutte e a tutti.
Good evening, everyone.
Buonasera ancora a tutte e a tutti.
Okay, good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to start a round table. So we tax the rich, share the wealth, building better democracies. Giorgio and Caterina have said a lot in their introduction. And well, first of all, I really appreciate that I'm breathing this very international attitude. Different population, different citizens, experiencing and sharing the same common goal. And around Europe, there is a kind of there's a kind of thing that we all should tackle. It is taxing the rich, and it does work. There's a socialist mayor in New York. Nobody would ever said a year ago. I would have never said. These are the recipes, you know. These are the good recipes, not just for the past, but also for the future. I have two books in my mind, two titles of books in my mind as I was coming over tonight. One from Luciano Gallino, the the fight in the class after the fight in the class, and it's like the left party had forgot how to go for it. And the second title was Have the Rich Won? So have the rich people won? Are the wealthy people the winners? You know, we can't actually accept this fate. 7% of rich people, wealthy people in Italy are paying less taxes than the middle class. And this is against the constitution. We are here in Milan. Milan, it is one of the cities that is more difficult to live for middle class and for lower social classes. But you have to consider that thanks to what the government did, a few years ago, where the radical left, of course, was not there, but was not part of that government. So the super rich coming over to Milan were actually allowed to pay the flat tax. You know, we do pay everything. We do pay the full tax rate. Whereas the rich ones, they come over, they can actually pay a flat tax, and they make our cities almost not livable anymore. So this is something that we're very much experiencing every single day. I was listening to the survey last night. 64% of Italian people are actually, I would actually agree on a wealth tax, and this is something that we're going to talk about. Try to understand what a wealth tax can be. Although the media are not really happy for such measures to be taken. And the media, so broadcasters and so on, are often owned by very multi-billionaire broadcasters, and they have no interest whatsoever to talk about the injustice. So taxing the rich, you know, and equality, it goes all across, because then it does collect to peace, to feminism, to work, to labor, to environmental justice. It is all about democracy. So it is crucial to talk through this. And what we're going to do tonight is exactly to have this kind of conversation. So thank you to the all attendees. I have seen several foreign delegations, but I've also seen that many left-wing parties are here tonight. I'm very pleased to see you all. Very, very pleased to see you all. As I understand, there's a growing interest around this idea. I've seen the desk of 1% Equal. They are now collecting signatures. So we're on the right pathway. I would love to start the roundtable right away. And actually, I would start with our first guest. Just allow me. Michael Maslenikov. So he is a policy advisor on inequality and tax justice from Oxfam. Each year, they do produce a report. And such report tells about this incredible injustice before our eyes. So my question for you, Michael, is how about the data, the most impressive data that you would like to share with us when it comes to this injustice, which is growing year after year? Also, I would love to ask you, what is the proposal that you have in your mind? So how is it that you can translate such proposal for Italy? And are there some specific ways to actually make it homogeneous? Because we're talking about aiming for 99% of our population. Well, thank you, Matteo. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. Well, let me tackle and let me address your question right away. Yeah, we are surely living in a world where inequalities, any type of inequality, income, wealth, you name it, but also inequalities in terms of accessing public goods, you know, and accessing to rights, the right to health, the right to school, to education. Well, this is a worsening scenario, and it looks like it is not stopping. From an economic standpoint, no doubt, we're actually experiencing a moment where the large billionaires, the big billionaires, have seen their wealth growing exponentially. And it shouldn't surprise, because their wealth is a financial wealth, and it goes hand in hand with markets. And ever since the financial crisis of 2007, well, they have greatly resumed. They have been able to catch up, which is something that workers have not been able to do. Likewise, and the middle classes haven't either. And they're shrinking in number and in spending power. So wealth is more and more concentrated, and I understand you haven't asked this question, but I want to say it. So we are living in a world where there is a worrisome, vicious cycle between huge health around and political power in the hands of the rich ones. And they can end up actually controlling policies. They can control the decision making, and therefore measures that could actually improve the quality of life of people are not being taken. And so these middle class people, they are not being represented. And Matteo also said that there is an impact on the narrative, the control when it comes to broadcasters, again, is shrinking. It is in the hands of a few. In this way, we're very much rejecting dignity to everybody, and we're not standing up for those measures that would protect people. And we're even kind of making inequalities lawful. And if you consider billionaires, one third of their wealth does not come from their genius, but it is inherited. And there's also some additional aspect that we should look at, their connections with politicians, or the monopoly powers that the richest in big companies, in big corporations have. So what is Tax the Rich doing? Well, because the wealth is less and less in the hands of few, there are some actions that should be taken, and perhaps I'm anticipating Quentin, because we understood from surveys that global billionaires over the last 40 years have grown their wealth by 7% a year.
But they contributed, and they contribute yearly to public money with only 0.3%. So this is their wealth. So trying to correct this distortion, the regression of the fiscal systems of many countries, amongst which ourselves, envisages measures that need to be charged upon the wealthy. One of these is a tax on wealth. Just notice that when we are talking about wealth tax, we are quite direct, but in the public space, Riccardo Stagliano, that you were quoting, was talking about multi-millionaire tax. Pedro Sanchez in Spain said we want measures that go and erode the resources of the people who are able to live more than 100 lives. And this is quite a strong message. So I'm going to finish by saying that pragmatically there's more tax-rich measures. We have formulated a manifesto together with 150 Italian communists. There is a revision of inheritance tax. Italy is a fiscal paradise for inheritance tax. There is a revision for capital tax, and there is also a tax on large wealth. So we want to introduce this with an exemption corresponding to the 0.01% of the richest Italian population. So this tax would not concern 99.99% of our citizens. A few years ago, I was worried about how this tax would be discussed in our country. Why? Because we were saying, okay, there is again a proposal that is going to, go to the detriment of the middle class. and this is a terrible sentence, there is even worse sentences pronounced by the people who govern our country. I have not seen a right-wing politician saying in any talk show, saying this is going against the Italian middle class. They are using different arguments. Now, the revenue net from potential tax evasion is 13-16 billion. This was the latest move by Meloni, which was about the latest act by Meloni. So let's talk about an example, and then I will close. If you have a net wealth of 6 million euros, you would pay 1% of that sum, 6,000 euros per year. A rich person would not even feel it. It's even less than a luxury purchase in Via Monte Napoleone. So we have to be able to talk about this. So today, Ellie Schlein, a political leader, talked, and then the usual media bubble started, mainstream report by Cottarelli, no reverential fear. All of the topics that were treated are absolutely rejectable, and we are not afraid to talk about this because we are talking about social fairness, social justice to contrast disequalities. Thank you. Thank you, Mikhail. Thank you so much. Quentin Parinello is here. He's a director of the Policies and the International Fiscal Observatory. Thanks for being here. Yesterday, The Economist was published, explaining that these new ideas are not news. And taxing the rich is very dangerous because then wealth disappears and the rich go somewhere else. But this criticism touches upon a real topic that concerns Europe. Now, do you think about Fiat, the largest Italian industry. They had moved to the Netherlands. So even inside a European system, there is some kind of dumping of companies that go to Ireland or other countries in order to pay less tax. And this is a real danger. So I would like to ask you about this topic, which is not only an Italian topic, but it's a topic that concerns all of the left governments and all of the progressive governments. How does it cross with all the risks, and what countermeasures can we take? Thank you. Thank you, Matteo. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to speak English because my Italian is not so good to answer on fiscal matters.
You're absolutely right that one of the main threats when discussing higher taxation of the super rich, and particularly wealth taxes on wealth, is the threat of migration. There are a number of other threats that are pushed in the public debate, and The Economist is every 5 years you have a headline about, oh, they have this idea of taxing the rich, this is the end of the world. I think that the best way to address it is to look at the historical experience of taxation of the rich, and we have a rich history of attempts of taxing the rich in Europe, and look at what worked, but also looked very seriously at what didn't work. And this is some of the things that we do at the International Tax Observatory. We're a research center based in Paris, directed by the French economist Gabriel Zuckman. Gabriel has been working on these issues for a number of years. We worked with a number of governments, the Brazilian governments of Lula, the government of Pedro Sanchez in Spain, and a number of parliamentarians in a number of countries. I think that there are four lessons of things not to do when you want to tax the rich. The first one is to try to tax their income, because it's very counterintuitive, but the super rich, they don't declare any income. This is one of the reasons they pay so little taxes. One year, a couple of years ago, we had revelations by the US newspaper ProPublica showing that Jeff Bezos declared so little income, close to zero, that he was able to claim family benefits. And he received a check from the US tax administration. And there's nothing illegal about this. This is just how the system works. Because the very notion of income is very poorly defined for the super rich. What you want to do is to tax wealth. We know the wealth of Jeff Bezos. He owns Amazon. The income is a bit difficult. So that's the first lesson. The second lesson is not to let them declare. The history of wealth taxes in Europe, we let the super rich declare their wealth. And there's a bit of a temptation sometimes to underreport, to forget some assets. And then, the result is that they don't pay enough taxes compared to their wealth. The tax administration can do it. And there's been so much progress on international tax cooperation, empowering tax administrations. They can do it. They can pre-fill the declaration. So that's the second lesson. The third lesson is that the vast majority of wealth taxes in Europe were full of exemptions. Exemptions for your first house, for your second house, for the small company, for the medium company. In France, we had an amazing idea. I'm French. We had an amazing idea in 1981. Our socialist government created a wealth tax. And immediately after, they decided to exempt those who owned a lot of financial assets, which is exactly what a billionaire is. So basically, they said, we're going to have a wealth tax, and we're going to exempt the billionaires from the wealth tax. So the result is that in 2016, the year before the end of our wealth tax, we had French billionaires who were paying an effective tax rate of 0.005%. I think that this is a clear intellectual and political failure. And the lesson on this is no exemption. If you're really targeting the super rich, the 0.1%, the 0.01%, they have the ability to pay. Don't put exemptions. They're smart enough to use the exemptions to end up not paying taxes. And finally, the last one, which was your question, which is the question of migration. It's really important to look at it and to address it seriously. And it starts by looking at the data. And when you look at the data, the number of people subjected to wealth tax that move is very, very tiny. Very, very tiny. Not a lot of people, but a lot of media noise. Which means that sometimes when you read the media about the risk of capital flights, people leaving, you feel like the seven plagues, the seven sins, and the invasions of cockroaches and things like this. The economic impact is limited. But more importantly, regardless of the number of people leaving, the biggest mistake that was made was to let them move. And at some point, one of the biggest intellectual failure was to consider tax competition as a law of nature. There's nothing we can do if they move. And the simple answer is no, it's not a law of nature, it's not gravity. Today, we let them leave. We accept that they leave, except that there are policy choices to make sure that, yes, they can leave, freedom of movement, but they will keep paying their taxes. You have two models, basically, today. You have the model in Italy, the model in France, and the model in Europe, where you lived a long time in Italy, you became very rich in Italy, you decide to move January 1st of next year, you're no longer paying taxes in Italy, except that your wealth is a social construct. You became rich because you benefited from public education, you benefited from the infrastructure, from the courts that protected your assets. So it's never just an individual success story. And you have the other models. The US model, where you will pay taxes in the US regardless of where you live. You've been there 2 months in your entire life, you will keep paying taxes to the US. Both are perhaps a bit extreme, so we can look for middle ground. Perhaps, the taxes need to follow you 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And this is one of the design features that we put in some of our recommendations to the G20 when Brazil asked us. This is one of the recommendations we put for what we called the Zuckman tax in France, a tax that was really focused on the super rich, no exemption. They need to pay 2% of their wealth, those with more than 100 million. And if they want to move, fine, move, go to Dubai, go to Switzerland, except we'll keep taxing you. And that is, I think, the main lesson. Tax evasion, tax competition is not a law of nature. This is a political choice. We can choose to tolerate it, or we can choose to fight it. And at the end, this is a political decision.
Bravo, grazie. Molto interessante.
Thank you so much. This was very, very interesting. Lee Anderson is a Finnish MEP, and Finnish countries have always looked like they are at the forefront, and with a system that was financing itself thanks to policies that were social democrat policies. So I would like to ask you now, today, how safe is Europe compared to the influence of the power of oligarchs, not only in Europe, but also in America? Think about the influence of Elon Musk on a planetary level, refusing all the different rules on social media, for example. We all know how this works, but also how he uses these platforms to convey messages that want to deregulate. So from your point of view, do you see European institutions managing to contain this, or are there signs that, so to speak, the dam is opening, and can we try and be a dam? Can we change the narration?
Thank you very much. And very happy to be here. I was also worried I was the only non-Italian speaker in the panel, but glad to get some support in English. This is a very good starting point, actually. I mean, many of the speakers mentioned democracy as a part of the discussion that we need to have when we talk about wealth tax. And that's also where I want to start. I mean, speaking more from the point of view of a politician, why is it important to speak about taxing the rich? Why does this topic have a broader societal significance and weight? Firstly, I think it is a good way of bringing class back into politics. Because when we put, the notion on the ultra-rich, people know I am not a part of that class. It brings back that perspective into our political discourse, and that is important. I also think it is important, especially for forces in the left, the progressive forces, to have quite clear answers for people that wonder, why does the world look like it does? Why are the rich getting richer? Why is my wage not enough to pay my bills? Why is food only getting more expensive? And they also want to know who is responsible for the world looking the way it does. And of course, I mean, in politics, in addition to having this class dimension, you also need to be able to name and tell people, why does the world look like it does, and who is responsible for this? Pointing the finger at the ultra-rich. But first and foremost, as we know, concentration of wealth is not only about economic inequality, but it is about an inequality regarding power. Because it is also a concentration of power. It is a threat to our democracies, as, for example, Oxfam, I think, very well has pointed out. Because what we are seeing, of course, and the US is an extremely good example of this, with the richest men in the world lining up behind Trump at his inauguration, showing very clearly where they are aligned and how they want to use their wealth and their power that they have. We have seen both in the US and in Europe what billionaires do when they have too much money. They very much like buying media. Whether it's the Washington Post or it's Twitter, then turned into X, whether it's Italian companies, we've seen it in France, extending, getting more ways through which they can influence their own power by using media and their own media structures. So I think this topic is also about telling people that we can take back control. I hate to say this, but I'm a very big fan of the Brexit slogan that they had. I'm not a fan of Brexit. But they were talking about taking back control, and I think that speaks to something people feel. We feel we have lost control of our societies, we have lost control of our economies, we have lost control, the tools that we need to make things better. Wealth tax is not the only tool that we need, but it's definitely one of them through which we can tell people that yes, we can take back control. How is Europe doing at the moment with regards to the pressure from these wealthy men? Not good. Because although there is a lot of talks about cutting dependencies and there is a lot of talks about a sovereign Europe, what is actually happening in decision-making in the European Union at the moment is that the EU is caving into the pressure that these men and their companies are exerting on Europe. You can see it now with the omnibus proposals, for example, through which the EU is opening up and weakening legislation on artificial intelligence and GDPR, legislation that was just done in the last mandate for us to be able to exercise democratic control over these giant tech corporations and their owners. And they are saying, that this is done because we want to strengthen the AI companies in Europe, which is of course not true, because the companies that benefit the most from this deregulation are of course the companies that at the moment are the ones with the strongest market position, and they are all the US tech companies. So you really see it very concretely, I think, that the Europe is caving in to the influence that these companies are having. We also see it in the so-called trade deal between the US and the EU, which is nothing else than an extortion deal. Once again, the EU is caving in to the way that the Trump administration, of course, backed up by these multi-billionaires and their companies, once again are exercising pressure on the EU. And I, as an MEP, I work in the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. And we have also had, I think, very important discussions on the role that companies such as Tesla and Amazon are having on labor market policies in Europe. Because when these companies come here, they do not only kind of, bring their logos, they also bring the thinking of their oligarch multi-billionaire owners when it comes to labor market policies. And so what unites Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos when it comes to labor market policy is that they do not engage in collective bargaining. So when they come here, they also bring their US labor market model and they're thinking around this, which is of course, once again, also a way to kind of break down the structures Europe has, or has had, to balance power on a societal level. Which brings me to my final point. We need wealth tax, but we also need a lot of other things in addition to that. And I think strengthening collective bargaining, strengthening trade unions is as important actually, because that is also about power relations in the labor market and in society. So we need to be able to tax the ultra-rich, but we also need to make sure that we have the structures in place, giving workers and labor sufficient power over capital.
Grazie.
Thank you. Elisabetta Piccolotti, perhaps you don't know her. Oh, yes, you do know her. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. So talking through Europe and talking about Italy. Well, Italy, we're going to vote next year, and the left-wing party will be there. So this idea of a tax in the rich, solidarity contribution from the union, and the wealth tax, it is becoming part of the public debate more and more, and more with respect to the past. Also, the PD, the Democratic Party, has actually changed their attitude. So how can this proposal actually become part of the government? And do you have an idea on how to actually translate it into something that perhaps it will be helping during the election? Well, first of all, thank you so much. Thank you to all of my colleagues. Thank you to the European Left Alliance. Thank you for being here because we all want to fight this battle together. We have been in this fight together in Italy. We want to reach out to Europe and we want to reach out to this goal of a European wealth tax. Although perhaps it looks like it is difficult, but the meeting tonight shows you that it is not impossible, actually. It is something that we can reach out to. So we started to collect signatures to impose the wealth tax back in 2021, and we made steps forward. And we were kind of being considered as complete nuts, you know? They were looking at us like if we were Bernie Sanders a few years ago. But then slowly, we were insisting, we were super bold on this, and we came to the point that now everyone is talking about the wealth tax now. Economists are talking through this, and researchers are giving new input to this. And people like us who have been having this conversation for many years, finally they see the consensus growing. We've seen the victory of Mandami, mayor in New York. We've seen a growing popularity in Borset, in Bernie Sanders, and many parties which are part of the European Left Alliance who are here with us tonight. We are fully positive that we'll be right, and time will prove that we were right from the beginning. And also, we believe that those who are still puzzled and confused about the wealth tax in Italy, they will be convinced in the future. And they will be convinced because what the right wing is now talking through, saying that we want to tax the middle class. Well, it is completely false. I mean, this is not true that we want to tax the middle class. It is not true. It is quite the opposite. We want to return some tax relief to workers of this country who are paying way more taxes percentage-wise with respect to those billionaires are actually paying. And this is not something that we say. You know, the financial newspaper in Italy, so financial newspaper Sole 24 Ore from Confindustria, has published an article saying that between 2020 and 2023, Labour has actually lost 12 points of power, and profits have increased by 14 points, 14%. So how about this, a gigantic transfer of wealth from those who work to those who are accumulating richness and wealth? Now, what else should we say? And the reason why I'm saying this is because, you know, we were saying in Italy, well, you shouldn't take it so harsh.
Proposte del tutto innocue. Oggi sembra che
Well, it looks like the slogan today is do not disturb those who are accumulating wealth. What Italian people do not know is that throughout Europe, the super rich can actually pay 1% tax rate just by simply hiding their wealth in family holdings. If Italians knew that whilst they pay 23 up to 43% on their salary, there is somebody who's paying 1% over their billion, there will be a complete revolution, you know? And this is something that we have to clarify. We have to tell people what it is all about. We don't want to be put on the spot. We don't want people to shut us down. And there's one thing that I want to say on the politician earthquake. You know, every time we say wealth tax, we're being beaten down. Oh, we're being looked at as if, Italian economy will just go in a trash can. Whereas actually it will be quite the opposite. If we compare Spain has a wealth tax. Italy doesn't have a wealth tax. Italy is growing by 0.5%. Spain will be growing by 2.8%. So how about wealth tax being considered something that spoils? Actually, it is quite the opposite. Again, only those countries where there will be state and public investments, those where you invest in health, in education, in the ecology transition, only those countries will grow. The state has to become the promoter of a technology innovation and economic innovation likewise. If you leave it to the market, if you leave the accumulators to accumulate their wealth, well, the economy will decline because people will get poorer and there will not be the possibility to actually drive the economic system towards common goals, which may deliver a better wealth. So we are profoundly right. And what we have to fight for, and this is also what Lee said a moment ago, power, this sense of not having power, not having control over your economy, over your country. They think that democracy is useless and that their vote will not impact because these super rich, these super billionaires, they often have big power in the media and it's like you cannot reach out of them. There's nothing you can do. Nothing and no one will impact that. This is not true. This is not true. If we get organized bottom up, actually, most of people all together through election and through politics, through good choices in politics, we may capsize this situation. We may change it. We need to trust this. We need to believe this is going to be possible. We have to go on many initiatives because that day will come, that day will come. This is no longer sustainable. It is not fair. It is not right. It is generating injustice. It is generating inequalities, and it is doing harm to the environment and to our future. Because the super rich are consuming the most, and therefore they are the worst in the CO2 emissions as well. So, if for the survivorship of mankind, as if it's been after the Second World War and after it has been written in the democratic constitutions of our continent, if we want to save Europe, we have to be able to tax the rich and redistribute the wealth. Thank you. Thank you. I'd love to go for a very quick second roundtable before I leave the floor to Fratoianni. I have a question for Michael. Now, every year you prepare a report, you share this report, and then you have discussions around this also on media, publications, and so on. My question is, over recent time, have you noticed a change in perception? So, as per your observatory, do you believe that people are more listening, are more aware with respect to the severity of this scenario? So do you feel that you're becoming more useful in what you do, and that you can actually convince the public opinion more and better? Well, two comments that we've received after publishing the report. So we published the report, and Oxfam report actually takes a snapshot of social inequalities. And this report is celebrating the first decade of life, so the first 10 years. During the first few years, media, right-wing media, right-wing controlled media and so-called free market doctrines. I don't want to mention names, but we know who we're talking about. So they were criticizing the data, they were criticizing the conclusions. What we have observed instead over the last few years is that these very media are actually preferring to to be silent, to stay silent. So the report has been disseminated by television, by general television, but actually there's very little comment from far left and far right, because it is very difficult, to make comment when what you read on the report, it is so bad, it is so severe, the ideology that is behind and that should really drive the next activities. There has been a promise for empowerment, more disseminating a well-being and so on. Well, this is not happening, It was a promise that was unkept, and everyone knows it. Everyone knows that promises have been unkept. And therefore, what we are very much worried about is that for those people to preserve the status quo, so to preserve the status quo, and we're talking about oligarch and super billionaires, because the dream hasn't been fulfilled yet, and this is a theory that we spoke about in our report. No, we need to rely on authoritative theories. And it's not by chance that totalitarianism is actually becoming gradually stronger. And many of European countries are not exempt from this.
Semmai è la preoccupazione che
this is what we're very much worried about. Back to your question, back to the democracy, this really brings to the erosion of democracies and to unbalance of constitutional powers, repression of dissent. And this all goes through messages which are trying to actually contaminate social rights. And this is a huge danger. So the last report has not generated any reaction whatsoever from the mainstream politicians. They haven't commented. They try to say something in a couple of talk shows on television, but of course they didn't have very much to say. So, well, our prime minister, she's not having any confrontation. She's not doing any press conference. She's only there on platform, but she's never there in press conferences. So they'd rather be silent, no comments. And this should actually make it even more important for us to listen very carefully when she's making statement, because but let me say that I'm very happy that over the last 2 years, actually, this publication, this report is also being used by the opposition parties. They sometimes use it for some inputs, and it has been used in political debate, the Italian parliament. I would like to remind everybody, this is just a snapshot of Italy, and it is not an apocalyptic snapshot. There is some apocalypse, yes, but actually back to what you were saying, back to what Lee Anderson was saying, our colleague was saying, it is being accompanied by hope, because we may, of course, aim for more control, for more balance, for better redistribution in terms of decision-making, and there's also a message of hope. And the message of hope that I'd love to share with everyone here, and you all know what I'm talking about. Messages of hope are existing in all European countries. They are out there in many of our territories, but they need to be valorized, they need to be emphasized, they need to be rebuilt in societies, and they need to be relaunched, because there's no light that is being cast on them, whereas we have to cast light for a change to be possible, because many people, they feel confused and they believe it is impossible. Thank you. Actually, I would love to bust a myth from the right wing when faced with the delocalization, outsourcing, and so on. Well, their answer has been we don't want to close ourselves, we don't want to isolate our country, thinking that they're making their interest for their workers. My question is, could you tell us quite rapidly now, as this is again a rip-off, actually, when you follow the debate. Protectionism, sovereignty, and closeness is not the answer to inequalities, as the right wing is trying to tell us to. How can we explain this?
In inglese, no? I think that one of the most striking developments over the past decades, starting in the 80s, has been the fact that a large part of the economic agenda has been put outside of the political conversation. Let the markets do. This is not up to the political discussions. The market will provide the efficiency, will find the solution. And one of the reactions to this is, in fact, to say, well, if we have nothing to impact on, on the economy, then we're going to talk about migration. We're going to close the borders. We're going to touch upon what is not the market. And I think that in the French context, we had a big debate on taxation of the super rich in France over the past 10 months. We were largely part of the conversation to an extent that the main reform that was discussed was called the Zuckman tax after my director, Gabriel Zuckman. And I was very much struck to see the far right, that a vast majority of the electorate of the far right supports higher taxes on the super rich in France. And this is not just a French exception. Across the globe, across political segments, there is massive support for increased taxes on the super rich, really the super rich. In fact, this is one of the economic manifesto points that is one of the most popular across the globe. And I was very, very surprised to see the far right in the beginning very concerned not to be seen as opposing the measure, and at the end, when they saw that the bill was about to pass, coming out very strongly against it, saying, no, this is not what we want to talk about. We want to talk about migration. And I think that it speaks more largely to the need to talk about economic inequality. And we're a research organization, so our role is to explain what is possible and what is not possible. And I think to conclude back to what I was saying before, if we accept tax competition as a law of nature, yes, a lot of the reforms that we imagine will simply appear as impossible. But if we understand that this is a political choice, that it has political responses, and what it takes is political courage, yes, we can fight inequality and advance on that agenda.
Grazie. Prima Lee Anderson parlava della sensazione, del bisogno delle persone di riprendere.
Lee Anderson was talking about the need for people to take control back. There is a general topic that animates our lives. Citizens become more and more consumers. They no longer think like people who have rights. There is a social pact breaking. So I'd like to ask you, even from this point of view, because you were talking about it before, making unions stronger, is the European left doing something in these terms, and what is it doing to continue to have this relationship with the organizations representing workers?
I mean, both as ILA, but also as the parties that are participating in this project, of course, have a very close cooperation with trade unions. So both on a European level and on a national level. And I think it is especially important at this point in time, because when we look at the far right, how it does policies, like one feature, of course, of this strand of political thinking has always been anti-trade unionism. So they are really aiming at this kind of labor market policy where you make people into consumers, as you said, or just individual workers, shifting focus away from ways in which you organize collectively, you bargain collectively, and then you also win collectively. And I know you have had big discussions in this in Italy under Giorgia Meloni. There is actually one thing that very clearly unites Finland and Italy at the moment. That is the fact that also Finland has a far-right government, or far-right in the government, together with the right wing. And one thing they have been doing in Finland is very clear attacks on trade unions. So they started out their whole kind of government policy with restricting the right to strike. And after that, they have been pushing through legislative reforms to weaken trade unions and weaken workers' rights. And what they are aiming, of course, is to kind of deconstruct these structures of collective strength. And they are important, I mean, because if we want to look at income distribution on the level of all of society, it is not enough to have good progressive tax policies, and it is not enough to have high enough minimum wages, but you need to have strong structures of collective bargaining, because that is also what ensures that you will have living wages, decent wages throughout the labor market. Of course, also then coupled with good working conditions regarding sick pay and holidays and working hours and so on. So this is really the time when we need to work together with trade unions also to kind of see the threat of the far right with regards to this. And I think it's been interesting. I was just in the UK before coming here, and I think you also see more and more examples of trade unions really investing, I think, in grassroots level organizing. I think in more and more places also one conclusion that we have drawn about what is an effective way to counter the far right has been to go back to what organizing originally was, which is events like this. It is knocking on doors. It is being active in your local community, because that is also the best way to kind of bridge the cultural wars of the digital sphere. It's the best way to kind of bridge the ways in which these tech oligarchs who control the algorithms are trying to boost up the extreme right and trying to kind of turn all of politics into this very affect-driven kind of far-right discourse. So that is absolutely something we need to do, and something that many of these European parties are doing. Also something I think the trade unions are doing more and more. So really kind of seeing that we have joint objective in this, seeing also good and inspiring examples that we can win the far right. Just as we say that this kind of concentration of wealth is not a force of nature. The rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer is not a force of nature. It's something that you can change. And also the far right is not a force of nature. They are just parties, they are just political organizations, and it's completely possible to win them.
Grazie. Chiudendo.
Thank you. Now, as someone working in communication, and I know that Beto Piccolotti pays a lot of attention to these topics, and she knows about social media, and she knows how, they are manipulated. Of course, this is, something very important to create and recreate cultural hegemony in social media, even through this topic. Through the things that you can see as a Sinistra Italiana, Italian left, can these things be something that paves the way to that part of an audience that is younger, that is not following traditional communications such as papers and TV, but goes to source their information on social media? Well, I would start saying that Italians in 2027 have to show that right is not going to win by natural law. And we are working in Finland for this as well, and in Italy, in Finland, and in all those countries where the far right won. We have to revert the situation, because this means that we need to close a growth phase of politics that is criminalizing the weaker and is also destroying the labor market. We also have to face the social media world, of course. We have to know that this is a world that is animated by algorithms that are against us, written by billionaires, some of the people, some amongst the most powerful people in the world, trying to manipulate the public opinion negatively. They are present on social media. You know that there are million of fake profiles creating shitstorms and offending progressive leaders, because they have to convince the population that they have it all wrong. So we have to take reality back. We have to give certainty to citizens who are confused, who cannot look at richness with an objective way. How many people make 1,400 euros a month and they are against wealth taxes? Why? Because maybe the day before they've seen a fake post saying we want to tax their grandma's house, or whatever small wealth they have. So we have to make an effort, and we have to use social media to tell the truth. And I would also like to add that there is a generation, the younger generation. They don't share all the fear of the older generation. When Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez went to the gala with a dress saying "tax the rich" on the back, social media went crazy, because the young people were sharing this image, because they have understood that the injustice of the fiscal system is becoming a destiny of poverty and underdevelopment for the young, who cannot buy a home. In a city like Milan, they cannot even pay rent. The education is lower quality because they could not access the most important private expensive universities. They know they will have to pay for climate damage. They know the world will be very difficult for them, and they know it is so because of liberist policies, unacceptable policies that have been carried out over the past decades, letting the rich accumulating wealth. So I think young people are our strength. The Gaza generation, but also the tax the rich generation, they are there, they exist, they are pushing us. And I believe that a lot of people, opinionists from the left, are writing that wealth tax is going to make us lose the election. They are wrong, because the wealth tax will make us win the elections, because all the generation that are waiting for a proposal for wealth redistribution and social justice will go and vote. Otherwise, they will stay home. So we have seen how courageous proposals are getting to our young people, things that people need: welfare, social justice, a future. When these people are young and need all those things, they believe and they go and they vote. So I think we should all stop thinking that people who are very negative about talking about these topics, we shouldn't say that talking about these topics is not beneficial to the left. I think it's exactly the opposite. We actually need to talk about this. And lastly, I would like to say something to the right and to Giorgia Meloni, because there's a lot of TV coverage saying it's not true, they want to tax the middle class. Now, this is the challenge. If you think that a super rich tax is right, decide the threshold. We accept any threshold. The important thing is to apply this tax, because there is no threshold that will make this tax not able to redistribute wealth. 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 100 million, like Zuckman says, any threshold works, because we know there is a huge concentration of wealth. 10% of people in Italy hold 60% of the country's wealth. Any threshold works, because a lot of billion will be redistributed to the weaker. Thank you. Thanks to all of our guests. And now I leave the floor to Nicola Fratoianni, the Secretary for Sinistra Italiana.
Adesso siamo di fronte a uno dei momenti della diretta per cui abbiamo assistito.
Now we have one of the most important moments of our life. We have to change our stage. So we're going to start with a different phase, which is very much connected to the words that were spoken. Very important words, testifying a very important political will. And now we are going to continue with this political will with the maximum courage possible. Now, I wish to thank all of the parties of European Left Alliance for taking part to this event, to this debate. And we are going to have a very high level of speakers representing their respective parties, but also our new idea of Europe. So wealth tax is a precise political choice. And now in front of you, you can see a lot of people coming from European Left Alliance, but also other parties who are not part of European Left Alliance, who will commit to taxing the rich and to contrast inequalities. So I'm now going to leave the floor to the National Secretary of Sinistra Italiana, Nicola Fratoianni. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank our comrades who have organized today and tomorrow. We are happy and proud to host this event after Rome for our common campaign, Justice for Palestine. We are very happy to be home in European Left Alliance, our European home. We are very happy to launch today and relaunch altogether a challenge to the super rich, a challenge to the privileged, a challenge to injustice, but most of all, a challenge to feeling resigned. We want to say that we no longer want to feel resigned today because the right wants us to give up. The right wants people who are weaker. They want them to think that being weak is their own fault, that there's nothing to do, that nothing will change. They want to think that nothing will change facing a world in flames where the war is the master. They want to convince us that there is nothing to do towards those who are using the force of weapons and wealth to destroy international law. They want us to ignore the humiliation in the workplace or the climate insecurity. So from Milan today, we want to say something simple and revolutionary at the same time. We are not giving up. We are going to do politics because we want to change the world. We do not want some small adjustments. We want to turn the table upside down. We are not giving up.
So, and this is the real meaning of the campaign. We want to tax the rich because it is possible to do it. You heard it from the speakers before me, but also those who will continue to talk through this after my speech. Taxing wealth, it is even a moderate option. It is common sense, choice. You know, there's this strong debate in Italy. Every time we submit a bolder proposal, whether it is a wealth tax or it is a reduction of working hours, preserving the salary, or stop the race to weapons, then the answer is you are the extremists, you're the radicals. Whereas we actually need to rely on moderation. Now, my question is to these people I always ask the same question. So, what's in it that more reformist? What is it that more common sense than talking through social justice, tax justice, environmental justice, peace? What is better than common sense, then understanding that the overall wealth is growing year after year? Year after year, complete poverty is increasing likewise. And isn't this normal to say that this is just a normal proposal which aims to redistribute wealth for the sake of the general vis-à-vis the smaller number, a small elite? So we should say that politicians should have a role. We don't want let's say, to remove the task of the politicians. Those who have large fortunes, they are now working to get rid of left-wing politicians. And those people say politicians are there just to facilitate and to favor interests of the rich ones. And those are afraid. These people are afraid that perhaps a population might get organized again, that they might win resignation, and that they might go back to stand up for their rights. Because if human beings, they start taking their hands and they start getting organized to claim back their rights, then the privileged may actually disappear all of a sudden. At that point, it is possible to think that you can change things. And this is the fundamental program which is driving our choices. We want to change everything. That's exactly the case. The world that we have in front of us, well, we don't like it. because it is feeding the climate crisis, because inequalities are weakening democracy, as inequalities are feeding the war. And faced with this terrible world, we have the duty to become a rebel. And I'm actually happy to say this. Yeah, I would love to call on those who are fearful of using words such as freedom. We are not afraid of using the right words, the right terminology, and I'll go to my conclusions as I want to leave the room to all of our friends who are going to talk after me. So, I'd love to say also to my colleagues from the Progressist coalition, a certain portion of the left-wing party has actually become a victim of the right wing, especially when it comes to the tax. It is now, it is a time to go back to use the right words. Because if we talk about a tax reform, and the one thing that politicians are only saying, you don't want to bring money out of Italians' pockets, then of course it tells you how much we're all victims to the right-wing party. Italians, like the Spanish, like the French, like the German, and so on and so forth, are not all the same. They are not all the same. Some people make it, but unfortunately, there's a majority who cannot even reach out to the middle of the month, not even the end of the month, for their salary to be taken. So if we're going to be bold enough, if we're going to have the courage to stand up for our rights and build bold projects, if we're going to have the ambition to imagine that government is not a comfortable place to sit, but it is actually a tool to change for the better the life of people, then we might win, starting from the next election in Italy, and then perhaps winning in other countries, and working together to change Europe and to change the world. We need that. We have a desperate need. It is urgent. It is necessary. It is possible.
Hi everybody. My name is Lucas. I'm the Secretary General of the European Left Alliance. I will introduce your speakers for the rally tonight. So please, without further ado, please a warm welcome to Manon Aubry, co-chair of the Left Group at the European Parliament.
Buongiorno a tutti. This is all my Italian for now. But whenever our comrades from Italy will have won against the fascist Meloni, I think you Italians can show the way to the rest of Europe, and we'll be very happy to learn the language of resistance against fascism. I want to say a very warm thank you to our Sinistra friends, because Sinistra Italiana is not only resisting against Meloni in Italy, they are also resisting with us in the European Parliament. And I have the great pleasure to sit with Ilaria, with Mimo in the European Parliament. And I can tell you every second that the fascists are trying to attack Ilaria, our group is standing there, resisting every single second and as long as it needs. And you know, we're a very young party. We're just less than a year old. But in less than a year, as a European party, we managed already to break a few European records at least. The most important of them is to have managed to reach 1 million signatures to suspend the EU Trade Association Agreement between Israel and the European Union. And we did that. And we did that in less than 3 months. I'm telling you that because the way we've been successful on campaigning on Palestine and justice for Palestine, we need to be as successful when it comes to campaigning on taxing the rich. And I say that not only as a left spokesperson, not only as a neighbor from La France Insoumise, but also as a former campaigner for Oxfam, so that you heard quite a few of my former colleagues talking right before. And you know, I've been talking for years and years on taxing the rich. And since I am among the first here to take the floor in this political rally, I'll make a provocative proposal. I think it's not time anymore to tax the rich. It's time actually to ban billionaires. To ban billionaires because we don't need billionaires to survive in our society. And in the 3 minutes I have left, I'll give you 3 reasons why we need to ban billionaires. The first reason is obviously to redistribute wealth, because we should never get used to live in a world in which a few individuals that would fit only here on that scene would own as much as the 50% poorest of the people. And those people owning and having enough wealth to sustain 10 generations of descendants. Why at the same time you've got every single person struggling to survive, struggling to pay the bills, struggling to take the car and pay for the fuel, struggling to pay the little pleasures for the kids. And that life is not normal. And I've always been wondering, because that's always something we've been told, you know, if you're taxing the rich, they might go away, they might disappear. And I'm like, what about the billionaires stop working for just one day? What is it going to change in a society? But on the other hand, if workers, if the people through which they're earning that much money, if they stop working just one day, they will not make that much money. They will not make that much dividends. They will not get that much wealth. And taxing the richest is about redistributing wealth, but it's about, as well, having a society that works for the many and not having a single person that earns in 2 hours as much dividends as a normal worker would win in a whole year. The second reason why we need to tax the rich, but not only to ban billionaires, is actually to reduce climate change. Think about it. Think about the climate impact of a billionaire compared to someone that is very poor. And actually, we've got the data. The top 0.1% produce as much CO2 emission than the bottom 50% of the population. So yes, banning billionaires is about also saving the planet. And last but not least, banning billionaires, taxing rich, is also about saving our democracy. Because yes, I'm not afraid to say it very loud and very clearly. Yes, the richest and the wealthiest in a society, they not only own money, they do not only own economic power, they own a part of a democracy. They own media, they own television channels, they own publishing houses, they own radio station. And this political power that they accumulate also has an influence on our democracies. We know it in Italy. We know it as well in my country, in France. And I'll end on that with a bit of hope. I do remember when I started campaigning on taxing the rich when I was working for Oxfam, it was something that was not very popular. In a couple of years' time, in France, we managed to get adopted, at least in the first round, the Zuckman tax that my colleague, or former colleague Quentin, talked about just before. We managed to do that because there's a change of a society, because people are fed up to pay for the richest, fed up for our public services to be cut, fed up to pay the price of climate change. So guys, people, the campaigns is only going to start. We are going to need all of you. Because what we've won in the heart of people, to have that consensus on the need to tax the rich, that campaign will need to go to every single village, to every single city, to every single country, and also to the European level. And you can count on us to lead that campaign and to live in a world in which a single billionaire doesn't make as much money in just waking up in the morning as a worker would do in his own life. So I'll end. I'll end on that. It's time for politicians not to push it back, we need to do it at the European level and then at the international level. And then what's next? We wait for the moon and the other planets to adopt taxing the rich? Well, all of the parties from the European Left Alliance will start campaigning, will keep campaigning until every single penny from the billionaires is back into our pocket, our collective pocket, and end the area of billionaires. Thanks very much. Grazie mille.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker comes from Spain. Please, a warm welcome to Irene Montero, member of the European Parliament.
Good afternoon. I will speak in Spanish, so if you need the interpretation. Mirad, el 1% más rico del planeta posee la mitad de la riqueza del mundo. El 1% posee más que el 95% restante. Tienen una fortuna de 210 billones de euros.
So we have a lack of 212 billion euros. So imagine how much money this is. So if we put 212 billion euros and made a mountain with 200 euros banknotes, we would get to the moon with this mountain. We would go around the world 6 times, and we could end hunger in the world twice. In the meanwhile, 50% of human beings on this planet have not even seen one of these banknotes, 200 euros banknotes, because amongst all the poor people, 50% of the people living on our planet, all of them represent only 2% of wealth. This is not changing very much in Europe, so I think that the question here is, how do we obtain this wealth? How do you accumulate all this money? Because in our society, they teach us to admire the rich, the white heterosexual with a suit and a tie, accumulating lots of money. Now, if one of you could make €1 million a month since 2026, as if you were Jesus, so getting to 2026, you, by earning €1 million a month in 2026 years without spending for food or for home, you would have never accumulated the wealth of the 3 richest men in the world. So you don't have to say that rich people create wealth, because I do not know any rich people who have worked for 2026 days of their lives. So, wealth is not honor, is theft. We live in a system where if you steal the rich, you are a thief and you go to prison. If you steal to normal people, you become a multi-millionaire. And they force us to admire people who are stealing from us, thinking that one day or the other we will become like them. And then the problem is women, the problem is migrants, the problem is transgender people. The reality is that while millions of families spend a lot of money to pay their bills, Iberdrola, Endresa, the main energy companies in Spain, but it's the same for the rest of Europe, are making a record profits, 6 billion in the last year. And while rent is skyrocketing, people pay 60-70% of their salary to pay for their home. And this speculation, this shameful criminal investment gets to 6-7% of rent, of profitability. And people generate more and more money. And as families cannot even buy fish or eggs, there are companies such as Mercadona or Carrefour. These large companies are making so much money. 1.7 billion just for Mercadona in Spain. So the capitalist system is a small-footed giant, because there is no economy in the world that can last more than a week without poor migrant women washing, cooking, and taking care of the elderly, taking care of ill people. So richness is not concentrated on rich people because they are working harder or because they are smarter. It is concentrated because they are stealing richness, wealth from people who work all week, pay for the bills. You are making some money, but they are making their wealth. So this is accumulating wealth, exploiting people. It's a theft. So what is not right, what is absolutely not right, is that this should not be legal. To be honest, we must understand that people want revenge. And when we say we need to tax the rich or impose a wealth tax, this is no revenge, this is justice. I think this is the rightest proposal we could have for our society, saying that the rich must give back what they have stolen, because they have stolen to everyone. So we want tax on the rich, and we want to nationalize strategic companies, and we want to claim back the use of millions of homes, and we want better salaries, better hospitals, better schools, better firefighters, better pensions, because our mothers, our grandmothers, the people we love more, even the people we don't know, they all have the same rights. They all have the right to be happy and to lead the life that they want. So, comrades, just like the Mexicans say, before in the round table they were saying, if you tax the rich, they'll go away. And maybe, yes, well, let them go. Let them go steal somewhere else. So tax the rich and free Palestine. Thank you.
Please now welcome from Portugal, the national.
So now I'm going to introduce José Manuel Pureza, National Coordinator of Bloco de Esquerda.
Ciao compagni. and for a share burden, for a fair share of the burden of financing public services, faces a huge challenge. The new techno-oligarchy is being able to accelerate the turn of the economic and social order into a new Far West with one single rule: might makes right. As Gabriel Zucman recently reminded us, and I quote, "The world's most fortunate people pay among the least in taxes relative to the amount of money they make." And he goes on showing that while historically the rich had to pay hefty taxes on corporate profits, and the wealth they passed to their heirs was subject to estate tax, the fact is, Zucman writes, that both taxes have been gutted in recent decades. So, faced with this new form of the capital's hegemony, it is worth perhaps looking for the past for inspiration. The Portuguese poet and playwright Almeida Garrett, who lived in the 19th century, dared to question the accumulation of wealth when another Far West, the Industrial Revolution, took place. And let me quote this 19th century author. "I ask the political economists and moralists whether they have ever calculated the number of individuals who must be condemned to misery, excessive labor, demoralization, infamy, degrading ignorance, inescapable hardship, and absolute poverty in order to produce one rich man." And Almeida Garrett was pointing to a very simple fact: the wealth of the rich always springs from the poverty of the poor. The political economists and moralists of Garrett's time are today the liberal government officials of our countries and the technocrats of the European Union. And they too have, just like their 19th century predecessors, one single answer to Garrett's question. They say that everyone gets what they deserve, and they call it merit. What they call merit is in fact what fractures societies and sets people against each other. And in that chaos, the market reigns supreme. It turns Elon Musk into the world's first trillionaire. It allows hundreds to engage in tax evasion through offshore tax havens. And it keeps the system running. But I would like to tell you something else. This week, workers in Portugal organized a general strike, the second in 6 months. Millions of people came together to fight for their rights. And to me, this is a powerful sign of hope. The growing struggles in Portugal against, for example, the privatization of public beaches are signs of hope. The mobilizations of rural communities in Portugal, resisting to the destruction of their territories by the greed of multinational mining corporations, are signs of hope. In all these struggles, there is a common force, and it emerges at the moment when someone who says usually, "I have a problem," starts saying, "We have a problem." The movement that begins in that moment is unstoppable. So, although it is true that the struggle for economic justice is long and difficult, I am deeply convinced that we are closer to winning this struggle. This struggle against the exploitation of the many, disguised as the merit of the few, as a political subject. It is the collective we of Portugal's general strike and of so many other collective struggles across Europe and across the world. What we are doing here today in Milan is bringing together that collective we from all our countries. We are uniting all those people across Europe who understand that behind every rich and prosperous man, there are hundreds of unhappy and impoverished people, and that the time has come to turn the tide. Thank you.
Obrigado. Now we're going from Portugal to the other side of the continent, to Finland, to welcome the chair of Vasemmistoliitto from Finland. Please, Minja Koskela.
Hello everyone, dear friends. It's great to see you all here. I'm genuinely love to be part of this important event. The feeling I get here today is that I am not alone. We are not alone. We are in this together, fighting for a better world. A world that is just and fair for workers, for the unemployed, for those who are marginalized and oppressed. The fight is not easy, I'll give you that. For 3 years, we've had the most right-wing government in power in Finland since 1930s. There's been no firewall to block the far right from power. I am sad to see something similar here in Italy, and unfortunately we're seeing it during this mandate in European Parliament too. In solidarity, I want to share the experience we've had during the last 3 years in Finland as an example of what happens when the traditional conservative right forms an alliance with the populist far right. The policies they've implemented in Finland have been catastrophic for low-income and working-class people. They've got social benefits and they weakened worker protections in a historical way. They've made the lives of immigrants even more difficult than before. And all this happened while before the last elections, the far right claimed they are the ones who stand up for working people and low-income families. What a lie that was. What we've seen, what we have seen and what we of course already knew, they, the far right, don't care about the regular people at all when they get power. Instead, they've taken on the economic agenda of the traditional conservative right that is directly opposed to the interests of workers and people struggling with low incomes. So much for standing up for the working people. Dear friends, I will say this very clearly. The far right betrayed, they absolutely betrayed the working class people of Finland, and they will do it elsewhere and everywhere if they get power. However, dear friends, I also want to say this, there is hope. Countering the far right requires not just good policies, but building trust. When people see who really improves their working conditions, who really implements better public services, and who is the one undermining these things, the far-right narrative begins to lose its power. And how do we do this? Well, we put the rich to pay their fair share. We need everyone to participate. Poor people and those surviving on social benefits are often accused of freeloading. I'll say this, if someone is a freeloader, it's the rich who don't pay their fair share. To correct this, we've proposed a millionaire tax in Finland. A very modest 1% tax on those worth more than €1 million. And what have we seen? It actually resonates with a lot of people. In a poll 6 months ago, 75% of the Finnish public were in favor of the idea of millionaire tax, like the one we proposed. Now our party, the Left Alliance, is attracting new members, young people like never before. We're polling at a historical level. I can see it in our events. I can see the same energy here today. So, dear friends, there is hope. Let's take the power back from the right, let's tax the rich and build better public services. And most of all, let's make the world a better place for all workers, for those who are not working, for students, for single-parent families, for those fleeing wars or looking for a better life, for all those who are marginalized and oppressed. Thank you, and also free Palestine.
Thank you very much. Warm welcome to Minja's neighbor from Sweden, Jonas Sjöstedt, member of the European Parliament. From Sweden, yeah.
Thank you so much. It's really great to see you here. Special thanks to Sinistra Italiana for organizing this fantastic event. Yesterday, I was with my two youngest kids. They graduated from high school. It was a bittersweet moment because I know the house will be very empty once they have left, but of course they should go. They should go and live their lives, find love, and do whatever they want to do with their lives. But I couldn't help contemplating a little bit. What are we trying to give to our children? What kind of values do we want to give to them? And I think, looking back, I think they taught me a lot more than I taught them, maybe in many ways. But I think some things unite us as parents. If we want our kids to be good people, good persons, we try to teach them to share, to cooperate. And if you get a lot, you share the stuff you got with your friends. You learn how to appreciate what others do for you. You learn how to say thank you when somebody helps you. And you learn that some people are not as fortunate as you are, and you should never, ever look down on them. I think many of us as parents try to give these values to our kids. But it seems that maybe the billionaires need this advice more than our kids sometimes. Because if we look at how they actually are behaving in our societies, it's like they think they are entitled to so much more than everyone else. It's like they think they have the right to make decisions for millions and millions of people. And they are never really happy. They're never really satisfied. They always want more. More money, more power, and pay less taxes. That's their logic. And this really hurts. It really harms our societies. Because we know when so much wealth gathers in so few hands, when they pay less and less taxes, there will be less money for schools, less money for hospitals, less money for railways, and all the other things that we need together. It shapes our societies fundamentally. It also shapes how we view each other as human beings. We know that equal societies are the best societies. And there's solid evidence for that. We know that in equal societies, people live longer and have better health, better physical health, better mental health. Equal societies tend to have lower criminality. They tend to have larger trust between people and less fear between people. They tend to have better school results, and maybe most important of all, they give every kid a fair chance the first day they go to school, full of aspirations. And we know it's good for democracy to have more equality. With all this power this money gives the billionaires, they think they have the right and the power to form our lives. They think they have a certain right to get their will through in politics, and they get direct access to ministers and EU commissioners who listen to them and who far too often copy-paste their proposals. And I think of this image sometimes when Donald Trump was inaugurated in Washington, how the richest and the most powerful men literally were standing behind him. He's their president. And many of them, like Elon Musk, the very richest man in the world, campaign openly for fascist and racist ideas with their money. It harms our democracy. The super rich, they're also standing in the way for the green transition. 100 large enterprises in the world emits the 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions. That has to change, or we will not succeed in the green transition. Who owns this company? Who has the ability to take decisions of changing them? It's the super rich. But it's the poor in the world who will feel the effect by the lack of change. And the lifestyle of the super rich, with their private jets, there's huge yachts in the Mediterranean harbors, their villas and palaces, is absolutely unsustainable if we are to win the battle against climate change and cut emissions. It has to be done with justice. And it looks like they view each other as heroes. But they haven't really got this fundamental thing that we taught our children, the common responsibility. And we know who creates all their wealth. They don't create the wealth. All the wealth they have is created by women and men who are working, by engineers, by workers who are dependent on teachers, on nurses, on cleaners. Without them, no wealth at all. And these are the people that we will represent. And we will start in Sweden in September, where we have general elections. And it looks good. There is a progressive majority. We think we will throw out the right and the extreme right from the government, and we think that the left party will enter the government with the Social Democrats and the Greens. Nothing is won yet, but it's looking good, and we have it in our hand. And the day after, when the parties who have won gather to form a government, Nooshi Dadgostar, our chairman who's sitting there, will have the tax for the billionaires first on the agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Adesso,
Grazie.
italiana del Parlamento.
And now, Secretary General from Italian Left-Wing Party, Ilaria Salis. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for being here. We're here today as we're all there for social justice. And for this reason, we want to redistribute wealth. And when we talk about taxes in Italy, the stories that we've been told is a very easy one. Taxes would be too high. But this sentence actually hides a lot more than what it says. Too high for who? So this is the question. This is the core of this concept. Our tax system presents an incredible paradox. For the majority of people who work and thrive on their labor, the tax pressure, tax burden is huge. And with the Meloni government has hit record numbers. For each one, the situation is different. Tax burden, it is contained. And also, it tends to diminish as you are richer and richer. It sounds absurd, but this is what it is. So the closer you get to the peak of the pyramid, the more the tax system actually loses in power. And this is something that should make us shiver if we consider tax principles as fair for everyone. And why is this happening? Well, because it is happening because labor is super taxed and land and assets are taxed too little. So IRPEF is the one progressive tax that we pay in Italy, although it has been reduced over the years. Consider that when the labor tax was introduced in 1984, there were 32 different thresholds, and the maximum tax rate was up to 72%. Now, thresholds have been progressively been diminished until they are now 3, and the maximum threshold is lowered to 43%. On the opposite, those who are accumulating wealth and are holding larger fortunes, they actually tend to pay less. For those who are renting homes, they will be paying kind of a flat tax at 21%, which is a huge advantage for house owners, especially for those who own and lease many houses. So as opposed of being taxed progressively, now the rent can actually rely on a much lower tax rate, which is not the one that actually retired people are now paying. So now the overall scenario is those who are living, basically receiving money for the house they own, they tend to get more money than those who are waking up every morning to go to work. So this is something that we also observe in a more favorable tax system for those who are not actually producing value with their work. So it looks like our society, it is better to inherit rather than work. It is better to ask for money rather than produce. But let's look at financial assets. Financial assets are usually being taxed at 26% and even 12% in some cases. And even in these scenarios, income which is coming from financial assets is benefiting from tax rates which is lower than the labor tax rates. And this is not all, because large fortunes often can rely on tools that the majority of citizens do not own, holding, and very complex financial advisors. And through these mechanisms, actually, the taxes which are eventually paid are very much minimized down to 1%. 1%. So the result of this is that a worker, a nurse, they are contributing way more to the tax system rather than those who have large, immense fortunes. This is completely unjust and unbalanced. Our proposal for a tax reform responds to a very easy principle and also very democratic. Those who have more shall contribute more. As simple as that. As the wealth collectively being produced but then being owned by few shall contribute at least partially to the collective good. So, of course, we do stand for those who are thriving on their work, and we want to remove the burden from the labor tax, and we want to be able to tax large fortunes and allow those who live and thrive on their salary to earn more. So we should review the tax system overall. It would be enough to actually have a wealth tax on the ultra billionaire, even the 1% of the population, which is around 50 million people in Italy. And it's not the middle class, and not those who own a house and perhaps have saved money for their entire life to ensure a future to the children. But I'm talking about those who are having large fortunes. In Italy, we're talking about 50,000 ultra-rich who would pay a little bit more without getting poor, without becoming poor. And those 50,000 people will actually help the whole of the Italian population better. This battle has to be fought also at a European level, as the free circulation of capital, it is translating into tax avoidance. We can't allow a billionaire to become a resident in tax haven and now taking responsibility towards the community that has allowed him to become a billionaire. So tax exile has to be banned for ultra-billionaires. And for this reason, it is very important to work all together in synergy and coordinating all of us at a European level. Tax the rich. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next in line, from Slovenia, Levica, Luka Mesec.
Okay, thank you, Luca. Dear comrades, thank you, Sinistra Italiana, for this great event. Luca, who presented me, said that his grandfather was Slovenian, that his father is named Janez, and I'm named Luca. I'm Slovenian, and my father is named Janez. So, yes, Europe is small, and I'm very glad that we are so connected. So Lucas said that I should introduce my own title, because in the announcement it said that I'm the Deputy Prime Minister of Slovenia and Minister for Labor, Family and Social Affairs. Well, unfortunately, that stood up until this morning, because this morning we have lost the government in Slovenia. So there's a very grim day today for Slovenia. We were one of the few progressive havens in Europe still struggling, in Europe that is going rightward, and unfortunately we lost the election, and we lost them in a manner unimaginable for me up until a few months ago. Namely, in the last week there was clear and absolutely transparent involvement of Israeli security services in Slovenian elections. That was one thing that happened, because we recognized Palestine. We decided to put a persona non grata for Benjamin Netanyahu and his compatriots. And yes, we paid the price. And we also paid the price because we stood up to the capital. We were not the government that is kneeling. We, instead of that, fought for solidarity in our society. We fought for housing for all. We fought for public health care for all. And we were trying to introduce fair wealth taxes. What happened in the elections was that the big capitals stood against us, and they went so far that just 2 days before the election, Slovenia started to run out of gas on the gas stations. I know that we've heard such stories from Latin America and Allende, but I was absolutely convinced that such a thing cannot happen to scare voters in an European country. But yes, we face that. However, I'm here today, I confess, I had to drink 2 Aperol Spritz outside to cheer myself up. But I'm here today because it is urgent. It is urgent to show them that we will not hide. We will not hide in our shelters for the storm to end. And we will not kneel. We are not frightened. We will fight back and we will get the power back. And I'm very glad, as a neighbor, that comrades in Italia are organizing, that we have a Sinistra Italiana that looks absolutely prominent, as I am very happy that finally we can see that European left is gathering together, and we are not entrangled in our own struggles between each other, who's more left and who's less left, and who's more pink and who's more red, but we are marching together. So this is a very good standpoint to start up a European campaign. And I would suggest a few things. Now, the first thing that I would suggest that we should fight for a principle that all income should be taxed equally. Today, a kindergarten attendant pays more relative taxes than a millionaire. Yes, because we have a double tax system, progressive for those who work and flat taxes for those who live from their passive incomes, from the capital. And we should abolish this, because this is not meritocracy. This is pure privilege. Second, we should fight for that the EU establishes minimum taxation standards. Because you know what we heard in Slovenia when we raised the taxes. They said, you are making our economy uncompetitive. Capital will flee to other countries that are more friendly to it. And we should absolutely do everything that is in our power to stop this at European level. We should set minimum standards for capital taxation. Third, I would suggest that we propose an EU wealth tax as an European tax. A tax that would support projects by the European Union and would be paid by millionaires and billionaires here. And to send a clear message, we are not talking about small fortunes here, people who own a house and an apartment. No, I'm talking about people who own $1 million, 10 million, or even 100 million. We should tax them. And last but not least, I would like to float a word into circulation. It is called redistribution, because we redistribute when wealth is already created and taken into the hands of the few, and then we tax the few to get the wealth back. That is not the optimum way how to get the wealth back. Because as Jonas said before me, how exactly is the wealth created? No, it is not created by a single genius individual. It is created by thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of individuals who work for him and his wealth. And my message is that we do not need to nationalize the whole economy to achieve redistribution, to achieve fairness. We have models that are functioning, playing around us. We are in Italy. In Emilia-Romagna, more than 40% of companies are organized as cooperatives. In the United States, there's a system called Employee Stock Ownership Plan. It is functioning already for 50 years, and it is a system that enables 14 million of American workers to be co-owners of the firms that they work in. And I'm very proud that in Slovenia, in the government that ended today, we managed to become the pioneer of European ESOP. ESOP that is made for European circumstances and for European needs. So my message is that if workers create the wealth, they at least should get a fair share of the profits. And no, it is not the billionaires who own the future. If we can get the workers behind us, it will be us who work the future. Thank you, comrades.
Voila. Thank you, Luca. And next, from Basque Country, member of the Basque Parliament, Nerea Kortajarena.
Bueno, mila esker, gaur Euskal Herria Bilduri, Euskal Herriko ezker Sinestrari. Muchas gracias a ella y a la Sinistra Italiana.
Thank you so much for giving me this possibility and for giving me the possibility to talk tonight in this meeting to change the world, which is crucial for us, as we are firmly convinced that this very moment we are having the perfect storm, a storm where we do observe difficult moments, war moments. There's a lot of confusion. It is also quite evident what is the journey that they want to impose, a austerity, a war austerity. And the justification is that they want to raise and increase the expense and the investment into weapons. There is always austerity when wars happen, and we're being dragged into it, and they have economic repercussions that will last over time, and that also take with it an increase in the spending power, and which is making even more difficult for workers who are becoming more and more precarious. So the question is, how can we protect the working class and our citizens? And there's another question. How can we do all of this when public services nowadays are very much experiencing a slowdown, responding to these risks that we know of, retirement, education, and healthcare? So what can we do when we observe such a social gap, which is impacted by huge crises? So we do have the dwelling crisis, but also the crisis relative to taking care of our citizens. There's also a climate crisis. In the energy transition, we're experiencing a very key moment. We have to go for an eco-feminist social transition. It is the perfect storm, as I said. Inside the perfect storm, we have to be able to respond. Otherwise, there will be a rupture, there will be a social fracture that will bring to a political crisis of such a size that we cannot even imagine. Faced with this situation, the question is, how can we respond to all this? How can we support life, which is what is at stake right now? And when can we do this? When there's an elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that the public costs are completely unbalanced. There have been years of neoliberalism. And what is this elephant in the room? Well, the elephant that no one wants to talk about. All of us in the left, we have to bring it up very loud and clear what the right-wing party is trying to hide and neglect. If we want to provide an answer to this crisis, public crisis, so the dwelling crisis, but also protecting citizens, if we want that states and countries are very much taking on responsibility of all of this that we women have done so far free of charge and that we will not carry on doing. And if we want a public support to become really massive for an environmental transition and social transition to happen, then the question and the dilemma cannot be that billionaires, those who are holding large fortunes, they are hitting record in earnings which are unimaginable. Well, they have to pay, and this is not a question whether we should tax the rich. They have to do it, period. This, we just have to make sure for all of this earning to translate into happiness and hope for the future generations. I've carefully listened to all the speeches that all of you have been talking through. You have all been of great inspiration to me. There are three key aspects which I understand are really essential for this to be fulfilled. Number one, we should not give in facing the powerful ones. We have to regain control. Number two, left-wing parties cannot go hand in hand with the right-wing parties. They cannot do it, especially on tax matters, as otherwise the consequences will be really bad for the quality of life. My dear comrades, there is a third indispensable aspect. Anything we spoke about today can only happen if we win the election, if we have more power, and if we can actually become a part of the government for all of these policies to become possible. You know, my party was actually joining the government in 2011, and we were holding power until 2015, and we were starting a tax on larger fortunes, and we've been heavily criticized, and we lost the following elections, but we proved that it was possible. And we proved that they could also be an advantage, and that the earnings that were actually stemming from these taxes were translating into better public services and better quality of life. I want to say something. My party, according to a survey that was run last week, in terms of intention to vote, we are now 30% in the Basque countries. So we're getting there, we're getting there. There are many municipalities where we are ruling, but this really has to become a big change. And it is inevitable that when we get there, and we will get there soon, it will be our task for all of these aspects that we're now tackling from a fiscal, from a tax viewpoint, will be applied, and this to the advantage of citizens for their better quality of life. We are experiencing a crucial moment. There are no different options. We shall not be reluctant. There are no other options for the left-wing party. These tax policies have to be applied 100%. We should not be confused because there's a lot at stake. At stake, there is a credibility of democracy, and at stake there is also the possibility of giving a future of happiness to the future generations. And it is evident that if we're able to apply these policies, and this will only happen if the left-wing parties can regain power, you know, the right wing may get upset. They may get upset, let's say it like this. But I'm sure that many will not be able to understand what is best to do. So maybe some societies will be against this, but that would only be only the last days of this. And we cannot actually consider any other options. Yes, are there any more options that we may consider? No, there's no other option. This is a common sense. And it is an overall sentiment that is being shared by the majority of the society, which is requesting for a different future, for different policies, requesting happiness and hope. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please, from Denmark, the party leader of the Red Green Alliance, Pelle Dragsted.
Hello, friends, comrades. So nice to be among you all again. A big thanks to Sinistra Italiana for hosting this great event, and for the ILA for just continuing to building this strong common European movement. We're so happy to be a part of it and very proud to be among all of you. In these sometimes dark moments, I'm happy to be able to bring you some good news from Denmark. 2 months ago, we held a general election, and not only did our party, the Red Green Alliance, for the first time become the biggest party in our capital, Copenhagen, in the capital region. The combined forces of the combined progressive forces to the left of the centrist Social Democrats had our best election result ever in the history of Danish democracy. The hard right also made gains, but they failed to secure a majority, and we will be able to keep them out of any political influence in the coming years. That was an Thank you so much. That was an important victory, but also an important message to Europe, that right-wing populism can be defeated and will be defeated. For the last 2 months, we have been engaged in really harsh negotiations among the parties of the center and the left. And in the end, on Tuesday, we were able to present the platform for a new government dependent on our party. And speaking of taxing the rich, I have some more good news for you. The new government has decided to double the inheritance tax to 30% for big inheritances. We will place a strict cap on tax deductions for big interest payments. We will close tax loopholes for millions and millions of euro in the corporate tax. And even better, the revenues of all these taxes will be used to the benefit of the people. We will cut VAT on food by half, while introducing zero VAT on all fruit and vegetables. We will increase pensions for the poor pensioners. We will make public transport free for kids and young people up to the age of 22. We will build thousands and thousands of non-profit social housing, and we have given the Social Housing Association the right to first refusal to buy private profit rental estates. And finally, friends, and I'm so proud to be able to tell you that, we have decided to make dental care free for everyone. This is my friend, the biggest expansion of our welfare state for decades and decades. Of course, these measures will improve the lives of millions. But maybe even more important, These kind of policies are our best weapons against the right-wing populism, against fascism. Because we know, all of us here know, that fascism finds fertile ground where people feel abandoned, wherever people feel insecure, wherever people see the prices and the rents going up while their salaries and pensions are stagnating. And as the Jewish philosopher Walter Benjamin wrote before he was killed, fleeing the Gestapo, he said, behind every successful fascism lies a failed revolution. Behind every successful fascism lies a failed revolution, because fascism feeds on real and understandable feelings of resignation and fear and frustration among ordinary people. The very same emotions that could have sown the seeds of solidarity and socialism. And friends and comrades, our best weapon against resignation, against fear, and against frustration is hope. To show that politics actually can work for the working class. To show that the wealth doesn't have to be concentrated in the hands of a small elite. To show that it's not necessary to dismantle or cut our welfare state. That if we actually tax the rich, we can expand it into new areas, creating even more freedom and social security for the majority. So friends, we must never forget this. Taxing the rich is anti-fascism. Fighting inequality is anti-fascism. Expanding our welfare state is anti-fascism. And standing here in Italy, the birthplace of fascism, but also the birthplace of anti-fascist resistance and victory. And standing here with comrades, and standing here with all you friends and comrades from all over Europe, ready to fight the good fight, let's reiterate the historic call of European anti-fascism. Ni un paso atrás, no pasarán. Thank you to you all.
Thank you very much. The political rally is approaching its term. We still have 3 brilliant speakers, but please, to all the speakers, I will ask you to stay around because we're gonna do a very nice family picture at the end. So if you can come back at the end to all the speakers so we can have a nice picture, that would be great. But without further ado, from the Netherlands, from the Socialist Party, please welcome Geert Gelfrink.
Grazie mille, Sinistra Italiana. Comrades, friends from across Europe, it's great to be here. I stand here on behalf of the Dutch delegation of the SP, together with Bastiaan van Apeldoorn, our senator, and Sarah Dobber, our MP, and we are very proud to be here because we want to tax the rich. Earlier today, here in Milan, we went to the museum and we stood before a famous painting, Giuseppe Pellizza da Volpedo's masterpiece, The Fourth Estate, Il Quattro Stato. If you visit Milan, you have to see this painting. It's a vast crowd of workers, men, women and children, and they march forward together out of the shadows And into the light, their faces are serious, determined, yet full of quiet strength. No single leader stands above the rest. They move as one body, united in purpose. This is not a riot of anger. This is the working class, calmly and powerfully claiming its rightful place in history. It's the fourth estate rising. That painting, created more than a century ago, speaks directly to our struggle today. Look around Europe now. Working people are once again on the march. Not always in the streets, but every single day in the fight to survive. Rents are exploding. Energy bills are crushing families. And food prices make ends meet feel impossible. Meanwhile, a handful of billionaires watch their wealth soar to unimaginable levels. They buy political influence, write the rules to protect their fortunes and dodge taxes through loopholes and havens. They undermine our democracies while making life unaffordable for the very people whose labor create their riches. The painting shows us the way forward. Just as these workers refuse to remain in the shadows, we must refuse to stay divided or defeated. The fourth estate, the working class of Europe, must rise again, together. That's why we fight for a bold tax on the rich. A real wealth tax on billionaires and multimillionaires. Close the tax havens. Make capital pay its fair share, exactly as labor does. Use that money to build millions of affordable homes. Strengthen public services. Guarantee decent wages and protect our planet for future generations. From Milan to Manchester, from Stockholm to Lisbon, from Athens to Berlin, the working people of Europe are one. The painting of Giuseppe Palizza dal Volpedo teaches us what unity looks like. Today, that unity must become our greatest weapon. The light is ahead of us. Let's walk forward together. Let's tax the rich. Let's tax the billionaires out of existence and make it so that every European can afford to live with dignity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is from Poland, from the party Razem. Please welcome Christian Talik.
Grazie, Sinistra Italiana. Thank you for organizing this beautiful event. Dear friends, when you look at Poland from the outside, it looks like a success story. The 20th largest economy in the world. Sounds nice. Almost 3 years ago, we kicked out the right wing out of power. The one who banned abortion, and the one who created LGBT-free zones, and then the new democratic government took power. Champagne corks popped in Europe. Poland was officially back in Europe. But was it? We could have joined this government, but we chose not to, without any guarantees to fund our key proposals. We are not in politics to occupy positions, but for change. Many people said we were crazy, but time has proven us right. The liberals have been breaking all the promises they made, stealing the youth's future. For most regular Poles, life has become harder and more expensive. Massive inequality is tearing our society apart. Let's take the Polish healthcare system. Public hospitals are drowning in debt. Facilities are closing down all over the country. We now have an area in Poland the size of Cyprus with no facility for a woman to give birth at. People's health has become a commodity. If you have money, you buy a ticket to see a doctor. If you don't, you wait at the back of the line and pray it's not too late. This is a stealthy privatization run by big clinics making money off people's misery. Who's actually responsible for this? It's Donald Tusk's government. They promised change, but they cut taxes for the rich, serve the lobbies. They completely ignore a brutal housing crisis, forcing millions of young people into lifelong debt and sky-high rents. A roof over your head is no longer a human right. It's just a cash machine for the rich. The brutal job market comes on top of this drama. Poland is facing a massive wave of layoffs. The unemployment rate for the people under 25 is up to over 12%. The cost of living had gone through the roof, but the wages remain frozen. Large corporations break their labor laws, use gig contracts and exploit people, and the liberals pretend they do not see it at all. What follows is what we see in Poland, in Italy, in France, all across Europe. They abandon people and we get righteous anger. Now is the far right that is stealing that anger. They approach the forgotten people and say, hey, we see you, we can hear you. And this should be us. We need to be there. We need to turn that anger into solidarity. That's why the role of the left focusing on economic justice is vital today. Our job is not to hide in safe spaces. Our duty is to go where the left is absent today, to talk to regular people in plain language and just listen. If we don't get our hands dirty in the real fight for people's rights, we don't deserve a damned vote. Since our very first presidential campaign of Adrian Zandberg last year, Razem has taken these words to heart. We are growing stronger with each day, despite everything. Big media, bankers, liberal propaganda. They tried to bury us many times, but we didn't give up. Just recently in Kraków, the second largest city in Poland, voters kicked out the mayor from Tusk's, our prime minister's party, in referendum for poor governance and bowing to developers. We immediately launched the campaign of Aleksandra Owca, our co-leader who spoke to you last year in Porto, for a mayor. We will knock 40,000 doors and talk to people and prove the doubters wrong yet again. Global corporations, oligarchs, the far right are all united across borders to protect their wealth and power. We must remain united so we can fight them. We need to stand in solidarity from east to west, stand with the working people across Europe. We need to stand as one, organize together and fight together. With you, my friends, we will win this fight for the people and the planet. And once again, grazie mille sinistra, grazie a tutti.
And now, last but not least, from Ireland, from Sinn Féin, they are huge.
Akarja, Campania, it is not for the rocks and fields, but for the people we fight. This maxim, popularized by the Irish Republican movement decades ago, defines our collective political struggle to this day. The scourge of inequality, of poverty, of hard work not paying is something we all must counter. This is what divides society the most. The cycle of poverty is vicious and nearly impossible to break. To paraphrase Rousseau, the first euro is harder earned than the second million. The only way to break this cycle is by giving people the opportunity to reach their potential in life. Decent housing, access to education, workers' rights, healthcare when it's needed, and a social protection floor through which no one can fall. And the only way that we can do that is with fair, progressive taxation regimes in each of our nations where those with little pay little and those with more pay more. Right across Europe, hard work is not paying off. Social mobility has stalled, opportunity restricted. Cost of living crises stretch from Newry to Naples. Decades of austerity have decimated essential public services. Housing, either secure tenancies or the prospect of owning your own home, far from being a reasonable aspiration, has become a forlorn dream for far too many. Stagnant wages, inflation, regressive changes to social welfare provision have all hit families and workers hard. And we're told by the political establishment that budgets are tight and savings need to be made, yet they refuse to tax their buddies and their donors an appropriate amount. Simultaneously, wealth is being increasingly concentrated in the hands of a tiny minority. The richest 5% in Europe now hold more wealth than they did in 2010, and the hoarding of extreme wealth by the 0.1% has steadily risen since the 1980s. High-tier earners and corporate taxpayers are supported, whilst the tax burden is being heaped onto workers and consumers. This is what holds us back, what divides society more than any other factor. This is what must be addressed collectively and domestically by all forces of the progressive left. Those with the deepest pockets must pay more, not less, and those who need support must get it and not be abandoned to their fate. In the south of Ireland, a vastly rich state, poverty is on the rise. 2025 figures show that over 1 in 8 of our citizens now live in poverty. We're seeing larger numbers of older people, the long-term sick, workers and students entering poverty, with ordinary people ripped off and record levels of homelessness. Ireland's Conservative government sits on massive budget surpluses. It had to be dragged to the courts to collect Apple's unpaid tax. It has cut the budget to the Department of Housing in the midst of a housing crisis and delivered tax breaks to landlords and property developers. Sinn Féin would abolish the universal social charge for low-income workers. We'll support renters. We'll make our publicly bailed out banks pay tax, and we'll introduce a solidarity tax on incomes over €140,000. We will invest in our communities and start to reverse the damage caused by austerity and income inequality, because people need support now. In the north of Ireland, Sinn Féin's strength in office has shown what can be done with political will. Our poverty levels are slightly lower than Britain's, due in no small part to our refusal to implement welfare cuts cruelly dictated by Westminster. We will not doubly charge our vulnerable citizens for water or medicines. We have the backs of workers and families. Our Good Jobs Bill is the most transformative piece of workers' rights legislation the Northern state has ever seen. Right-wing elements continue to try and block these measures, but we, supported by our allies in the trade union movement, are committed to delivering real change for our communities. And we're doing all of this in the environment of having no taxation levers of our own. We have to deliver public services in the north with a woefully inadequate budget set by the British government in Westminster, a government that sets taxation policy for us and cares nothing about the people of the north of Ireland. Only with true financial and political independence can we ever properly address these challenges as a nation. Only Irish unity gives us the ability to build a fairer, better Ireland. Akarja, strong public services, access to housing, socialised healthcare, robust workers' rights, free education and the welfare state are the strongest cards we have in the fight against inequality and poverty. And they can only be delivered in conjunction with fair and efficient tax regimes, one that sees the burdens on workers and families reduced and the wealthiest pay their fair share. Now, on the surface of things, that task seems mammoth. But our revolutionary trade union leader, Jim Larkin, over a century ago, gave us our mandate. The great only appear great because we are on our knees. Let us rise. Grazie mille. Gormila Mayagav Kalef.
So we are at the end of our long and exciting meeting. I'm going to start with some logistics. Please remember at the end of the event to give back your headsets at the desk that you see outside. And then I wish to thank a few people, and this is not to be taken for granted. I wish to thank the Santeria that allowed us to hold the event in this wonderful place. All the people that produce work, that have booked the tickets, that have organized every single detail of this event. Thanks, everyone, you know. And I also wish to thank the interpreters who allowed us to communicate. And there is also a mistake, you know, we should draw some conclusions. I don't think there is anything to conclude here. I think this is just a beginning. A lot of things have been said, a lot of reflections, a lot of thinking. We have the duty not to lose ourselves because we have started a party together, you know, but we need to go home with some results. Taxing the rich and destroying inequality is very important. So I think we should truly stick to this. Thank you so much. So I was forgetting a fundamental thing. I have to ask all the speakers to come here for a family photo. Thank you so much.